Today on the Writer's Gym, we're going to be talking about characters, the bedrock of all fiction, and the elements that make us as readers care about stories, relationships, and events. This is the Writer's Gym podcast. The Writer's Gym podcast. Build creative confidence and grow your writing life with Rachel Knightley and Emily Incan. Rachel Knightley
Hello.
And Emily Incan. Hello.
Hello.
Now, character building. Now, this podcast is character building in many ways, but we are going to actually be talking about building characters today. Just thought I should get that disambiguation in there before we start. I'm sure we will make that joke again later.
Consider us disambiguated.
Thank
Absolutely.
you very much.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Now, characters. I think that a trap that some writers fall into is that their characters feel like they zapped into existence on page one of the story you're reading. They don't seem to have a past or any history, and the only things that influence them and make them tick are the events we actually witness in the story. Is that something that bugs you as well?
The opposite of which I am deeply guilty has been bugging me for 20 years. So I don't disagree with that, but I have a confession first. That's all right.
Please confess.
It's not really a confession. It's enormously common. Not that I knew that when I was first accused of it rightly. I was so matey with my characters. I didn't want bad things to happen to them. I wanted you to understand how and why they were everything that they were. And that gives you a lot of words and not a lot of momentum. So a couple of things changed for me about that. I'll tell you what did not change for me is I love writing characters. That I'm not regretting a moment of my development as a writer. I'm very character motivated. It's wonderful. But the being matey with them, I forget somebody who taught me in my MA said that or wrote it on something. You're too matey with your characters. And that's fine when it's fan fiction. Right, when you're writing for yourself, shall we say,
Yes.
and that's your intended audience and we're not going beyond there, go for it. When it is purely for fun, go for it. And of course, when it's a first draft, go for it. But my problem was that I wanted it to go too well for all of them as I would for my friends. They were absolutely right. I was too matey with them if the objective was get a novel published. I was too matey for that because not enough was happening, not enough was changing. But best of all, there wasn't something that they needed to learn about the world at the beginning, because that's what gets me from A to B or A to Z rather, is what do they need to learn about the world and how does this story teach it to them? And if you're letting them be wrong about some fairly fundamental things, it's just, oh, look, a lovely life. Ages later, oh, look, it's still lovely.
Yeah.
Which might sound like a good week to have, but not a great novel to read.
Yeah.
Emily,
Yeah.
you do some beastly things to your characters.
I do.
I don't think you could be accused of being too matey with them.
I know
or maybe
everything
could you?
about them, but I'm not matey with them. I mean, when it comes to characters who zap, I absolutely recognise this in some books, and it really annoys me. It's just lazy. Basically, it's like, here's a cardboard cutout character. Insert hero here. And the writer knows perhaps two things about them. Firstly, normally that their parents are dead. Secondly, that all they want to do is live an ordinary life doing insert manageable dream. And I get it. Some writers are plot driven and prefer to sort of like discover on the way. But then if you're going to do that, go back to the beginning and layer in some insights into the character, some depth once you discover it. Don't just leave the character flat to start with and assume that that's enough. With my own work, I definitely learn things on the go. I don't know everything. I learn things on the go, but then it is a matter of just going back and layering things in. And when I say layering things in, I don't mean like dump a whole load of exposition in there to say, oh, and when they were 3, this happened to them. No, just the odd sentence maybe add a line to a section of dialogue that just alludes to something there that happened. You don't even have to be explicit, just a bit of shadowing from the past that can come through into the present and make something relevant. That's all you need to give your readers a sense of depth that is not just cardboard cutout, hero, let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we will explore this a lot more as this discussion progresses. Rachel, how do you prepare a character for their appearance in your writing? Is it kind of hair and makeup and a bit of backstory, or what?
No, that's just how I get to my desk.
Wow.
Oh, I'd like to say it's a joke, but no. For me, most stories start with a character, and that character is already in a situation. And I arrive in that situation with whatever has landed in my head, and we go for this walk together. And like Emily was saying about coming back and filling things in, I know that will happen, and I've done it enough times now that I understand those things. But the place that I'm coming from, so the 20-something person doing that MA that I told you about, who was way too matey with her characters if what she wanted was to get a published novel, it's kind of a character exercise in itself, because as human beings, our strengths and weaknesses are implicitly linked. I'm fascinated by why people do what they do, think what they think. It's why I became a coach, because I was working with writers, because I want them to be able to bring all of themselves to it, but fundamentally because it's interesting. I'm interested in people, and that will be a strength in certain areas, but it will absolutely be a weakness in here's another 27 fascinating things. So you do need to keep that sense of momentum. But if I'm honest, that sense of momentum of learning that character in natural time, of going along with them, that has helped me work out what can be jettisoned, what exposition is actually other things beginning with X that you just get rid of. You know? And that has helped enormously. I think momentum tells you what a character would do in a natural moment. You've still got all this wonderful stuff that you know about them, all this character building, and it has got you to this point, probably. It is probably how you got where you got, but that doesn't mean you keep it all with you as you go.
What about you, Emily? How do you prep a character for their appearance in your writing?
It's a whole process. With the Dex Legacy, the characters have been with me for 15 years. So they had gone through many changes over that 15 years in the back of my head. I tried them on in different stories, in different ages, at different points in their lives. So I had a lot of background with these characters. One of the things that I've said before is that character and world come into existence together for me. Not everybody works like this. For me, it's quite natural. But for those that don't, I think it's important to think about the place your story starts and how your character came to be there and how they feel about it and what is their social standing, and ask why with every single one of the answers that you provide to those questions. Another thing that I like to do to get depth on my characters is to interview myself about them. So I do this a lot. I walk around the house and I'm whispering all the time. It drives my spouse absolutely crazy. But if you were at a reading at the launch of your book and readers were asking you questions, do you want to sit there looking like you don't have a clue? Like, oh, well, they just did a thing and it was fun. Or do you want to have reasons behind the story? I think that interviewing yourself and putting yourself in the shoes of the reader, asking the writer questions about why, what happened there, why did you do that, why did you make that choice, that is incredibly valuable, I think. And it leads you to know your characters better and to also know yourself as a writer better. And that has also helped me. And I think previously we've talked about, or I've mentioned the fact that I don't like to hide as a writer. I owe it to my characters to know when I'm hiding behind something and not attacking something head on and not giving it the sort of exposure that it needs, like not dealing with it, being a coward, basically, in my storytelling. And interviewing myself has really helped that. Imagine if I'd made a decision, like I put my character through a traumatic situation and somebody who had read it was affected by it and asked me why I dealt with it in a certain way. If I was sitting there trying to answer this audience member this very reasonable question, what would I say? What would my justification be? sometimes when I'm asking myself these questions, I think I don't have justification for that apart from I didn't want to upset anybody, or I was scared of getting it wrong, or I just wasn't brave enough. Then you realize it's like, okay, am I okay with that? Because some people it's like, I'm not brave enough, okay, I won't do it. But you've got to be okay with that decision as a writer. Getting to know those characters, getting to know who they are, getting to know why, and getting to know yourself as a writer and why you're presenting your characters the way you are. All of that is very important, I think.
In our recent episode about world building, you both suggested that for your writing of place or world, you only really need to know about the setting that your characters can see or which they visit.
And remember.
And remember, of their path.
With them in their time stream.
So is it possible, do you think, that you could apply that same approach to characters? We only need to see the breadth and depth of characters insofar as these traits become important in the story.
I don't know if this is what Emily was thinking when she was talking just now, but hearing you ask that and listening to what you were saying, Emily, the future questions of readers, what a lot of it came back to for me, I don't want to just say because I wasn't brave enough. The definition of brave when you're writing is finding out what the result of your curiosity is not going, oh, I'm not allowed to go over there, or it might go a bit wrong, or what will somebody think, and never finding out. It's listening to the curiosity, because subconsciously there's a lot going on that we're not aware of, that we're not actually going to see how all the jigsaw pieces fit together from our subconscious unless we put them all together ourselves consciously. I suppose where I find my answers to that is in making sure that I do follow my curiosity. I think we're using the term questioning ourselves very differently here, but I guess for balance, I would also notice if the questions I was asking myself are things that stop me writing or keep me writing, because I have an excuses bingo card that I do with my clients a lot, which is what are all the questions that you hear in your head that are actually there to stop you writing? And sometimes there will be questions that are not there to stop you writing, not my mum would hate this, or what would so-and-so think, but what if so-and-so saw that, but what if this happens? What if she saw this? Or that keep you discovering the curiosity tracks, that you're either going on your rails in the direction of your curiosity or you're going away from it.
What do you think, Emily? I mean, are you someone who wants to draw the full breadth and depth of a character before they kind of walk onto the stage, as it were, of your first scene that you're writing about them? Or can you get by with just enough to make them convincing and nuanced in that scene and then write more as they develop?
What's really important to me is knowing who they are, what their past is, but also exploring how other people react to them. Because sometimes I will be aware of myself in a certain way, but it's not until I say something and someone reacts to what I've said, or someone draws a conclusion that I didn't see coming based on something that I've done in the past, or someone, something that I've been a part of in the past. That stuff then becomes relevant to me as much as it then becomes relevant to the character. One of my characters will not see themselves as privileged above the others, but then somebody else will point it out, and then that becomes relevant to them. But it's not relevant to the character as such. These are relevancies to the other characters interacting with them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It feels like when I was talking about the questions that either keep you writing or stop you writing, that feels like an answer to that. The way I would use, is this a first draft question? And either it will keep me moving forward or it won't. And it's playing to your strengths, interests, engine, maybe?
I guess, yeah. I mean, it's sort of like saying, okay, these are the things that my character knows about themselves. These are the things that everybody else knows about my character. Those things might be different to how the character views themselves. Knowing those things can be quite different. It's like the ripples thing. People only need to know about what's immediate, the immediate character's experience, and then where they stand, there are ripples. And you should probably know the answer to stuff until the ripples run out. But beyond the ripples, no one gives a crap. We don't need to know beyond that.
And also the fact that you do know the answer doesn't mean you have to stick it down your reader's throat that you know.
Absolutely. No, I mean, that stuff can literally, if you're writing dialogue, it can be in a reaction to something that the character says. It can just inform how another person is when that person just decides to walk into a room as opposed to knocking first. Like that kind of behavior that would be, the character themselves, if they just walk through a door, it's very unlikely that they're going to be conscious of the fact that they made the decision not to knock. I mean, sometimes it will be, but some characters, they just walk into a room without thinking about it. The character on the inside of the room might be like, well, that's damn typical. But all of these are traits that belong to the one character, but whether the character themselves notices it or not. And then you don't have to then go into oh, well, you didn't knock because you come from this background and you have a this and blah, blah, blah. You can just say, oh, nice of you to knock or something. And then that's it. That's all you have to do is just point out to the reader that they didn't knock. They made that choice or they didn't. The reader can fill in the gaps.
We'll talk a lot more about, what you need to know about characters and what you don't perhaps need to know and what you don't need to share about characters very shortly. But I want to ask a question. I'll come to you first on this, Rachel. For you in your writing, what comes first? Is it character or story?
I'm not sure, in all honesty, sitting here, that there is a difference for me. Because if there is a story, it's because a person gets changed by something. And they and the world are better or worse as a result of it. Now, picking on my younger self one more time, she didn't get that. She just wanted to have a nice day with her characters. And there's a lovely drama exercise that we used to use in youth theatre, which is character A, it's a lovely day, isn't it? Character B, yes.
Yes.
Character A, pass the cake. Character B, sure, the end. However, in version 2 of the script, it then goes character A, wait, you stole my cake. Character B, no, I didn't. And now we have drama. And it's facetious, it's a joke, it's making the point that conflict is essential, but it also is a good reminder that a human being never opens their mouth unless they want something. So for me, it's what does the character want? What does the character fear? Whether we are talking about life or art, that's what's going on the whole time. So I can't really differentiate in terms of how I think about it, because that's what a story is for me. And perhaps as a result, I'm more drawn to stories of different kinds that are character motivated. That doesn't mean anything like, oh, literary, yes, genre fiction, no, because obviously that's not where I am at all, as you know. But it's the voice of the universe, the point that the voice is trying to make. So whether it's Douglas Adams or Terry Pratchett or Julian Barnes or Maggie O'Farrell, it's always who first. So if I had to, where do I start? It's character, but I don't really experience the difference.
Now, Emily, you are on record on this very podcast as saying that characters are the starting point for your stories.
Yep.
Can you say a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, sure. Basically, without characters, you don't really have a story. I really struggle to read books where I know that the plot has driven the story, not the characters. When the characters are just a sort of vessel and they are not particularly deep and they are just going along to show the reader a cool thing or to interrogate a concept. But at the heart of that is not how the character feels about it, is not how the character changes as a result. It's about the character just being along for the ride and things happening to them and them just sort of taking it and moving on and taking the next step and plodding forward. I find those really, really hard because at the end of the day, I don't care how cool the concept is. It can be a cool concept. You can summarize that in 2 sentences. Fine, I'll read it on the blurb. I don't need to know the contents of the book unless I care about how it affects the character and how the character explores this world where this concept exists and how the concept changes the character and how the character is challenged by it and changed by it and ultimately overcomes it, assimilates with it, does whatever they do with it at the end. That's the interesting part of the story. That is what's going to keep me reading. And there is a sort of criticism when it comes to genre writing in the past that it's been very much sort of like concept driven as opposed to character driven. And you can see that in the past of sort of like science fiction, especially like certain books in the past that are like lauded. Now I read them and I'm like, I'm struggling with this because the character is a cardboard cutout or the character is abandoned halfway through. And then we're on to another completely different character who is also just as plain. And character is not at the core. It's not the driving force. It's changing a lot. This is a good thing. I'm relieved. I'm happy. As a sci-fi writer myself, this brings me joy. But yes, I struggle with just plot driven.
This next question, and you can both have a bite at this one, is along similar lines, I think. Is it possible that a character, just the existence of a character, can alone suggest or inspire a story?
Yeah, absolutely. You look out of the window, you stand at the bus stop, the world is your writing prompt. Anything can inspire a story. An object on my desk right now, if I went, okay, pair of scissors, and then
that could be quite a scary story, actually, a pair of scissors.
It could be.
Well, yes, it could. And then the person sitting next to you on the Zoom could have a story that is all very fluffy and about a sewing box and nothing dangerous happens. And this is what I'm talking about. I pick up the next one, lip balm. There could be a scary story about the lip balm. People even more so. When you look at a person, you see a different version of them to somebody else in their life who knows them maybe just as well as you do, but has a completely different experience or angle on it. This is why it's about curiosity. It's about sharing what inspires, interests, the reflex actions are in your brain when you have that prompt.
I think I've mentioned the fact that my characters were with me for a long time, and there were many stories that I was sort of inspired with them, but none of them fitted. But then, weirdly, it was a specific relationship that fell into place between two of the characters. And it was one very nondescript evening. I was laying on my exercise mat, pretending to exercise and actually thinking about my characters, which not at all is a habit of mine. But this one day I realized, oh my God, she wouldn't be in a relationship with him. She'd be in a relationship with him. Oh my goodness. And then suddenly it all fell into place. And that is just key character stuff. It's a defining thing about this character that just snaps into place one day. And then you've got the entire story and the story unfolds. And without that relationship, without that moment of realizing fundamentally who this character is in the first place, because who they happen to be spending their time with and in a relationship with and all of those things, how they feel about it, blah, 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 blah. That is all very character defining. And so this moment happened where I realized this very fundamental thing and the entire story unraveled from that point. Who are they? Why are they together? How is this a challenge? Do they have a challenge here? Is it easy? Is it hard? Is it this? Is it that? Why is it this? This is because of the world. What happens on their journey through this relationship?
I think that's, of all the questions we've been asked, that is the one that we've pretended not to just go yes next to, because people are why we're here. Understanding the human condition that we are stuck with and that is somehow terrifying and infinite. Where do you not start?
Well, indeed. Well, look, other people that understand the human condition and are paid for understanding that condition are actors. Now, this is a question. I'm going to start with Emily, but I know, Rachel, you have a background in theatre as well, so please do come in on
this. You do like lambda coaching and stuff, don't you? Like teaching people to do the thing.
So, but Emily, as a writer of audio drama, one thing that we do, and we co-direct a lot of dramas, actors come to us and they want to know things about characters. They want to know some of the stuff that we've said up to this point as writers may not be so important. Those actors want to know it. What formed their character? What were the influences that made their character the way they are? So that they can understand the nuances and portray the foibles and characteristics of that person. How do you go about briefing actors and directing them to help them play their characters?
Well, really it comes down to, a lot of the time, who the character is, how old they are, where they came from, what they like, but really also what are their relationships like with the other characters they're going to interact with, and are these things justified, are they not justified? All of that characteristics come from those questions and those conversations. The actor will take that and build up a little collage of who this person is at the center of it all, motivations and opinions and thoughts and feelings. And then they will do the magical thing of then becoming that person. And it is a magical thing to me. I mean, I know that there's actually a science to it. Rachel can explain more of, sort of how that magic happens.
I've never been accused of explaining science before.
This is science in inverted commas, arty science. Mechanics, I guess, is more
No, arty science works.
Arty science. Okay, arty science of this. Yeah, so I just sort of throw ingredients at them. But
Sounds
those
like
are
a drag king name.
Arty science.
Arty science.
Yeah.
But carry on.
Yeah. Either that or a wrestler name.
No, I want it to be a drag king.
You want it to be a drag king?
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah. Okay, fair.
Well, moving on then. Rachel, as both an actor and as someone who has directed
something
actors,
else I've not been accused of for a while.
What do actors do with that set of information?
All right,
that
so
they're given?
a health warning beforehand. I probably knew I was a writer already when I was 13-year-old me and had nagged for a very long time to join a local youth theatre. And I was very shy as a teenager, and I was at a school where the message we got was confident people are actors, which I have spent my professional life helping other people not be on the wrong end of. That there is no separation between confident people and not confident people. There is what your audience relationship is like, and you can make that more authentic, and drama is a place to do that. The youth theatre was where I started working that out. This will be relevant to the question in a second, I promise. What happened was there was an improvisation circle, and I remember walking in there. I don't remember what the scene was, but when it was my turn, I put my feet on the desk that was one of the bits of furniture in there, and I just had these words go through my head: I have as much right to be here as anybody else. And my mind obviously needed to hear that, so it had told itself that. I have no idea what the scene was about, as I said, but it happened. And I went on to be a youth theatre leader, and I went on to be a youth theatre director of some of the shows there and things like that. And I dropped out to finish my PhD because, well, let's just say my last show was improbable fiction, where the writers group keep telling each other why they've done no writing. That's what the first act is all about. It was a note to self. So yes, I'm still directing Lambda, but in the days where I was an actor and when I was advising actors and coaching actors, because coaching actors is what a good director does. We go into the actor's head and we find that route together. We don't just go move your arm like that, smile more.
Exactly.
It's finding the truth from within. But what we're really doing is we're reading the script. First of all, we are not. With one of the first plays I ever directed, I did have somebody who had only read the scenes he was in. I did have somebody do that and not understand what my face was doing as a result of that. It is out there, but it's out there as a matter of fear. What we do is we get them to enjoy the treasure collection of going through that entire play, of building their own psychological picture of the world the writer has created, and then using, as I was doing when I walked into that circle, both the I fear and the I want, that makes you fill in what's underneath the surface being what we speak, what we do. That's what the rest of the world sees. But then there's all of this beneath the surface. So it is a conversation, but the right and wrong of it, if there is one, is going to be what has the writer given us. That means that these are the words that get said, but what's not being said, as Emily was talking about, somebody walks through the door and you think typical. That's because of everything that's happened to you and everything that's happened to them. And it is magical, but it is again about trusting your reader, that we don't want the writer to feel like they have to do all of that for us. They give us enough truth. We will find that truth in that drama.
Yeah.
And I think something that we've often said, Emily, when working with actors, that characters in dramas, and I'm sure this is as true as in film or TV or stage as it is in radio drama, the characters are co-creations, aren't they? Up to a point, they are owned by the writer, but then the actor brings sometimes something that the writer foresaw, often something that they didn't. And of course, the director has a role as well. I mean, how difficult is it as a writer to kind of send your character out there to be changed a bit and molded a bit? Is that something that you're comfortable with, or is there always a bit of tension in that?
So the way I sort of solved this when I started working with you on the Dex Legacy was by making myself co-director. And I don't remember there being a sort of conversation around that, but I just really thoroughly briefed the actors. What was important to me at that point was, I mean, these actors I knew, first off, when you're creating, like you just said, Rachel, there is a point, like there is a sort of like process with the director of sort of finding a path together with the actor and getting to the essence of what's going on in a scene together. When we were recording the Dex Legacy, we were remote. I didn't really directly speak to the actors at all. So I was briefing them remotely. And this gave me the screaming heebie-jeebies because I knew that these people would get this script, read it cold, think, okay, well, this is just a one-off. I'll just do it, whatever. And they might go in a direction that was completely inappropriate to the wider world. So I needed them to understand the wider world. I needed them to understand these characters in a wider context. So I thoroughly briefed them on who their character was and why. And that was to sort of center them in the world and also help the actor to sort of get that this is not just a one-off. Not for me. This is something much bigger as a writer, and I'm trusting them with this. And there is a huge amount of trust. You know, you're working with somebody to co-create this character. Now, as a result, I don't consider myself to have let go because I'm always there. And I'm always there in a supporting role. But I mean, the actors do things that I'm not expecting. You in the mixes do things that I'm not expecting. And that's great. But at the same time, I'm still there as part of the process to sort of say, okay, well, that's a good surprise. Or that's a surprise that takes it in a direction that is not in keeping with the rest of the books. Now, if I was, as a writer, handing over my book to a director, probably in another country.
And I'm not going to be in the room when it's recorded.
Not going to be in a room. Potentially not going to be, I mean, if it was my books that were being adapted, not going to be there when the scripts were written. I mean, you know, then you find out later that someone's cut an entire character, or they've introduced a whole new character that didn't exist before, or, you know, like decisions like that have been made. Would I be okay with it? I don't think I would. I genuinely don't. This is terrifying to me because I'm so used to owning the world and creating it. And I've created it in different mediums. And I've been with these characters in different contexts and different creative sort of zones, that the idea of somebody else coming in, you know, and just doing something with that is not in keeping with who they are, it's very uncomfortable for me. And I do not see that as a bonus. Like I wouldn't mind that being the case if I wrote like a one-off book. If it was like any other trilogy, I think that if I put my energy into any other characters, any other project, I'd be like, fine, go for your life, you know, do whatever you want with it. But the Dex Legacy, I think I would have a lot of trouble with that. Just because of the energy and the amount of like work and the amount I've put into it. I think this one is particularly special. Other ones, I think I'd be like, no, you can do what you want with that.
It's in fact, it's award-winningly special, as we may have mentioned before. So,
as we may have mentioned before,
so
we're going to rinse that.
We will thoroughly rinse that for another year until someone else wins the award next year.
Absolutely.
Rachel, have you been in situations where you've had to entrust other people to interpret? I mean, we do that with readers, I guess, when we send a story out into the world, don't we? But in a drama or a theatre sense, have you put your writing into the hands of other people and trusted them to get it right, in inverted commas?
The place I'm in with this right now is, most recently I submitted a very short script, because very short scripts were being asked for, to an evening of drama called Q Who, and it was not the Whoniverse, Questers Theatre, and it was not the Whoniverse because obviously they can't afford that. We're not allowed those things. But it's about the fans outside that world. And what mattered to me, because this was my old theatre that I grew up in, and I'd got this email about, would you like to submit something? I thought, all right then. And it got through, and that was lovely. But for me, what the opportunity was there was to not be there. I was coming at it from a mindset of, I am now a writer. I am not directing. I'm coaching Lambda exams, but beyond that, I'm not directing now. What the opportunity is for me here is to let this writing go into the world and see what happens. I was so happy with it. I was delighted with what the director found in it, most of which was things that I did know I'd put there. But as with anything that can stand on its own feet, there's things you don't know you've put there. This wasn't like the Dex Legacy, something that I'm going to continue necessarily series and series and series. I am planning to make a longer version of it, but as it happens, but it's not what you're describing. It's not something that you're still writing, Emily. You're still creating people. So for me, this was a finished product, and I wanted to give myself the opportunity to see what would happen. So I said I won't be around regularly for rehearsals because I can't, I'm working. But if you have any questions, please let me know at any time, blah, blah, blah. And it was a really good experience. And it was nice for me because when we were doing our feedback episode in last series, I had some ghosts I needed to lay to rest around that and its way back towards that. And none of those things, including me dealing with my demons, none of those things could have happened if I didn't let go. And obviously, as a novelist and a short story writer, one does not sit next to the reader turning the pages for them and going, here's the other things you need to know, because it's a completely different medium. But for me, as a director, I would not want anything to be performed or recorded if I didn't feel that actor knew what they needed to know. So I don't necessarily think there's a discrepancy here. I think it's about letting people do the job that you believe they are the people to do.
And I would argue that there is also a very large element of trust. There are certain actors, and this is why we do auditions, this is why we spend so much time on casting, certain actors that we trust, certain directors that we trust, Emily. And producers that you trust, and I think it's an easier process if you've got people around you that you trust than if it's going out completely blind to somewhere unknown to be interpreted by people who you've never met and don't know anything about. So, but I'm sure that's common in lots of other artistic areas as well.
I think maybe it comes from writing is tricky. Writing when you're sort of working for somebody else. I've been in a lot of positions where the writer is dismissed. It's like, yeah, we hear what you're saying, but no. And as a result, I guess when it comes to my writing of this, I kind of have maybe some trauma in the back of my head that it's like, it would be like that. Yeah, we hear what you're saying, but no. And it's like, but that's going to change everything. That is not a good decision for the overall artistic vision of what this is. And just dismissing it. If I was involved, I think George R.R. Martin was involved in the writing of some of the seasons of Game of Thrones, as in like translating it into a script. That would be great. And when it comes to changing things, I'm absolutely fine with changing things. As long as I'm there during the process that I can sort of say, okay, yeah, that's fine. It could be a big change. But as long as I'm there to sort of sense check it, and I can then think, okay, well, maybe then I'll just change these things in the rest of it that will then make sense and tie into this and make it consistent. But the idea of being in a team and then just be like, okay, yeah, we don't need you anymore. I'm not going to talk to you anymore. And then that's it. Or, yeah, we hear what you say. And no.
It's so interesting to hear that as well, because from the character point of view, and just going back to this, I fear. That's what is going on in every human being's mind all the time. And we know that about our characters. So I think sometimes it becomes, if I knew I could get what I want, that it could work, what would that look like? And if what it looks like is me being involved the whole time, then game on. But if on the other hand it is, I'm curious about this, that those opportunities come up, and it's not right or wrong. It's just being clear with ourselves about what we want.
Exactly.
And, I was, to be able to process my trauma around that script was a really good thing for me. And if one day, I have absolutely no doubt, as things grow and get more and more successful and more known, you get the opportunity to work with more and more people, working relationships keep on changing and growing. And it may be that trauma does get processed, and that people that weren't necessarily, shall we say, creative soulmates for you, who might not be anymore, you're going to upgrade.
Yeah.
You're going to have a different experience.
I want to move on to another aspect of character building, character writing. And the question is this: should writers be trying really hard to create believable and plausible characters? Or is the role of the character as part of the story, a tool to move a story along, more important? So believable versus nicely flowing story.
I don't think I can move for the should fairies that seem to flying around.
They're everywhere, aren't they?
They are a bit, because hearing that, it is possible for any given listener to go, oh yes, I should be doing more of that, and maybe you should, but maybe not. And for me anyway, yes, if left to my own devices, I'm going to be very character heavy and not as structural, and I will need to work on my momentum and I will need to work on my plot. But unless I'm having that fun first, none of those other things can happen. So a bit like what Emily was saying at the beginning about when something is very obviously plot driven, that is frustrating. However, of all of the fictional characters who have ever existed, the one we all think we know terribly well is Sherlock Holmes, because the narrative voice of Dr. Watson caught us, and we're rarely in Holmes's head. We pop up in a diary entry, but what made it real was the relationship. It wasn't knowing every thought in their head. And yes, it's massively plot driven, and yes, we can all play what holes can we find in the arguments, blah blah blah, but none of that is the point, because the character was so hypnotic.
Emily, do you have any thoughts on believable and plausible versus tool to drive story forward?
See, okay, there is another school of thought on this. I mean, obviously, I've already been very vocal about, yes, please, believable characters. But there is a form of writing characters where it's characterized very extreme characters that are not in themselves believable as real people in the world, because they're too magical, or they are too extreme, or they are caricatures of something. And I think this can work amazingly well. Angela Carter, absolutely fantastic writer, sort of very magical realism kind of stuff. Her characters are extreme. If you met them on the street, you would think, what the hell was that? You know, like that was a weird thing to encounter. But they fit within her world, and they fit within the extremes and within the moods that she creates in her narrative. And still, the character is the center of the story, the character and what's happened to them and everything. But it's all exaggerated until they almost become a caricature of what that world has made. That is a very interesting device as well. So I would say that as a writer, you can choose, you can make decisions to do all sorts of things with your character. What is important is that you don't, consistency to a degree. Yeah. And again, yes, okay, like there are places where that's broken, you know, like every rule is broken, okay. But generally speaking, if you start out in a very sort of realistic world, and then suddenly chapter 5, this character just becomes a caricature and the world is crazy. And then chapter 6, it goes back and we never see that ever again. That is probably, you'd have to be quite skilled to be able to pull that sort of thing off. As long as your character is consistent within the world, they can be beyond believable. And I would think that that's like when you've got characters who are not believable because they're lacking, as opposed to characters that are not believable because they've gone so far and they have become something else and they are beyond.
It's like performance styles, isn't it? It's like commedia dell'arte. If you take something like Angela Carter, that is fairy tales who have discovered sex and power, and it fits within its world. It's obeying the world rules as you would have different styles of performance on stage or in audio, heightened, realistic, everything.
It is very performative, and books like Nights at the Circus. These are all very performative books. Yes, they're very much centered around stage and performance, and these characters are performers, and that shows through. And so I think believable, yes, context important, whether the character is lacking or whether the character has gone beyond. That is an important distinction.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Just a quick aside, I think, because a lot of writers create characters that are either directly based upon or influenced by a person that they know in the real world, or perhaps a confluence of several people. What are the do's and don'ts for you as writers of using real folk? Don't get caught, surely.
Don't get caught. Sometimes there are don'ts and shoulds.
Yeah.
Know what your story is versus what your life experience is. So, for example, I don't have a trophy for it, but I'll mention it again anyway because we're in that mood. When my first ghosty sort of story won the first prize in Writers' Forum, the male narrator whose head I'm in for that absolutely has got 2/3 real people who were in my life. And when I say who inspired me, I do not mean they were my heroes. I do not mean that they were on a pedestal somewhere. I mean something made me go, that's interesting. And another person who made me go, that's interesting. And then you take your bits of plasticine and you, from your imagination, and you merge those colours together. And the health warning that I would stick on that is that I think every character is stronger if there is something that you've based from reality, and if you're honest with yourself, there's going to be a tiny thing in there that is somewhere. Make sure that there's at least another amount from another person so that you've got a minimum of 2 real life things that know that confluence was spotted by you. That somebody else, 2 people wouldn't have taken those same bits of plasticine and made this new colour. It's unique to you.
And also that there's a bit of plausible deniability in there as well. If someone comes back to you,
take it down to that.
Someone says, "Is that me?"
I don't believe I've ever had anybody in any of them who they could legitimately say to me, "Is that me?" But every character that I have created has drawn on something that amused, interested, somethinged me, and the worst writing advice I ever got, and I don't think it was even deliberate writing advice, but the worst thing that you can say to a writer is either write what you know and think it's literal, or don't use your life experience. Because both of those as concrete statements can send you off into the land of the should fairies and absolutely paralyze you. Whereas what we're really doing the whole time is we are mixing freely, and this is why curiosity is my watchword. Mix the colours.
How many of your characters, Emily, are influenced by real people, and if so, who? No, don't answer that.
Yeah, all of them. I mean, like, the thing is that I sort of say that as writers, we're experience harvesters, and as a result, everywhere we go, everyone we interact with, every person that we come across, every character that we read is all going into our brains and then churning around, and then we stick it in the mincer and pour it out onto the page. And as a result, saying my characters are not influenced by real people would be the hugest, massive lie. They all are, but I would say that all of my characters are influenced by at least 4 or 5 different people. That then come together and certain characteristics come out in them, and then another bit of them is this person and another bit of them is that person, and then within themselves they are completely consistent, but they are wholly unique as well.
Another example, can I just do an experiential example as well?
Yeah.
Something I had in an anthology about 15 years ago involved a character giving up smoking, and I had somebody come up to me and say, "Oh, you absolutely got it. I could really tell that you'd had that experience, and I hadn't. I've smoked precisely 1 cigarette, age 14, because my friend Laura was very nice about the fact that she knew I wanted to know that I really did disapprove of it, honest," which I thought was the most ethically open thing I'd ever heard in my life. So thank you for that, Laura. But the not giving it up, no, I hadn't. Yes, I had researched it. Yes, I'd talked to people who'd smoked and missed smoking. But mainly the physical sensations were about panic. It was about giving up an addiction, about not having something that you'd had. I was drawing on what it felt like to be anxious about something, and I was imagining the rest. So again, it's always confluence. It's never just one thing. So even if I had smoked, and even if it had been an actual example, I'd still have needed a bit of other things, because nothing is ever just one thing. You're always mixing at least 2 or 3 things.
I think it's important to do that. And I think that one thing that I would say, I don't know if I've spoken about this before, but it is absolutely a sort of, I have this idea really that parents Parents are a different thing when it comes to writers. Parents, because they make you, I think it's quite common that parents think that what you create is somehow a reflection on them, or at least if you're writing parental figures and the parental figures are a bit crap, that maybe this is a critique on them personally. And I think that this is the bottom, this is at the root of why so many heroes, their parents are dead. They are orphans. And I think that this comes from the fact that the authors know that at some point a parent may read this book.
See, we've had such different experience. I dedicated Twisted Branches to my mother for always letting me find the power of my own stories. And she was in the workshop where I told everybody how important it was to me that there was as much heterosexual sex as homosexual sex, that there was no different in amount or quality within the book. And she was in that workshop. And I will admit I did not look at the Zoom square that she was in. But it's so different.
It's fascinating that this is, it's so different. But I know that there's a lot of writers out there that sort of feel the same way as me. There's even memes. Like you've got like there's a classic one where a writer's at a signing and their parents are there saying, look, if we knew you were going to grow up to be an author, we wouldn't have been so shit. Like it was, and these memes about parents being sort of like at the root of a lot of angst and stuff. It all comes down to it.
And I think I'm not denying that at all. I'm not meaning to say that a lot of people don't feel like that, but what I think is an important example of is that there isn't a definitive experience, that
of course
all brands are open and available.
Yeah, but I think that it's like, I like to have this idea. It amuses me the fact that a lot of people kill off the parents and their main characters because they can just foresee an awful lot of emotional conflict coming from that, and their parents reading this and taking it personally, and they just see this on the horizon and think, nope, can't deal with it. Okay, parents dead. Right, moving on. And it just makes things so much more simple for a lot of writers.
They mess you up, your ma and pa, to wrongly paraphrase Philip Larkin.
Not all parents do, but yeah, everyone's flawed. And I think I saw one comedian who said, being a parent is fantastic because you get to mess someone up from scratch. Yeah.
I won't comment on that.
I always laughed at that. Yeah.
We're coming to the end of this episode, and just before we come to the Rachel challenge for this week, I want to ask you both very briefly, could you give me an example from books, TV, film, theatre, of really, really well-written characters? And I'm going to start because I've been watching a show called The Bear. I think it's on Disney Plus. I can't remember which platform. There are so many these days. And I think it's a great example of show don't tell in characterization. So we observe characters, the camera will linger on them for a moment. There's not a lot said, but you will observe things and learn things about those characters in just these tiny snippets about their reaction to something someone else has said or done, just little hints at their motivations. So if you haven't, have a look at The Bear. It's a great show, but some really great character stuff in there. Who wants to go next?
I can. I will go
on,
next.
Emily.
So yeah, for me, Arcane, the League of Legends, absolutely fantastic characters. Watch it again, and watch it again, because the storytelling in it is masterful. The way these characters sort of develop over time, and the story is given time as well, and the way it's structured is very, very clever. Another one from last year is Blue Eye Samurai. That show, again, fantastic, amazing depth of character revealed through the story. Both of those are animated, and it's just interesting to me that those two really stood out to me as seriously good in terms of character development, and they both happen to be animated, which I think goes against certain assumptions that a lot of people might have about
animated shows in general.
Animated shows in general.
We'll share those, of course, in our show notes. And Rachel, anything from you?
Two different ways of doing it really, really well, and worth comparing, just so that there's not only one way of doing it really, really well. I mentioned Sherlock Holmes earlier, and most of what we see about him is from the outside. and we're interested in what we see, and it brings us in, and the relationship with the narrator, but we don't get all of the thoughts. Him and Viola from Twelfth Night, who is plonked into this appalling situation where she's in a society where to be a lady with no money means she can't exist. So that is why she cross-dresses. That is why she's presented to Orsino as a page to make her living. And that is why she has to have these incredibly difficult conversations. My father had a daughter, loved a man, and as if were I a woman, I should, your lordship. And then talking about how it actually feels to be her while holding back. And she gets the happy ending because it's drama, and because aside from the occasional soliloquy, you're not in the head. You see them through their behaviour. So have a look at either or both of those, or go and do completely the opposite. So Leanne Moriarty in Apples Never Fall. Oh, Sherlock and Moriarty. Didn't know I'd done that.
Very nice.
Interesting. Apples Never Fall is a mystery that involves an entire family, and you see every family member from every other family member's point of view, which is something that I just enjoy enormously. But you piece the truth, if you like, together through what they think and what they're wrong about each other, and the things that they get really annoyed by and misconstrue in each other, and also what they're right about. So you get a lot of value for your money in Apples Never Fall. One more where you can do it from within the person's head. So just to be clear, you can do it all of the ways. Don in The Rosie Project, he thinks not like other people, and everything is purely logical to him. And the comedy is exquisite, and the details that he sees in other people that we, the reader, can understand, and he, the character, can't. But it's done dexterous with such lightness, it wears its ability so lightly. But I think these are all really good examples of trust your reader by exploring.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And then back to you, Rachel, for this week's exercise or challenge.
Okay, so you, the writer, have your artist palette, and on your artist palette you have all of the possible colours of memory, imagination, observation and questions about the world that you have amassed in the time you have been alive. I dare you to mix those colours freely with people. Take a person, take another person. They'll be linked in some way because it will come from your curiosity. It will come from some link you've made or something you're interested in doing, and do it freely. And when you notice those questions going, is it all right if, or what would so-and-so think if, you ask yourself, is that a first draft question? And you put it to the side and you keep following that curiosity, and you will have somebody who is absolutely solid and real to you.
Excellent. Well, listeners, we challenge you to go away and have a go at that exercise. Any final thoughts before we wrap up on this character building episode of the Writer's Gym?
Have fun.
Yeah.
For God's sake, it's the best job in the world, whether you're being paid for it or not. In fact, the moments where you're definitely not being paid for it are probably the freest fun. Go and have the fun, and don't give a what you think somebody else might think.
Excellent.
Amen. Yep.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I would completely.
Are you going to
agree
actually
with you.
beep in me saying beep, or are we going to leave it as me saying beep?
I can beep that in as if you like.
I think it might be funnier without, but I'd be up for either.
I mean, I actually swore earlier.
I would have quoted Larkin more fully if I.
Exactly. Maybe we should go back and put the swearing back in.
We probably should. Yeah.
Like Bart Simpson's lines, we've got to go back and swear more over and over again.
Thank you very much, Rachel Knightley and Emily Inkpen, for joining us on this episode of the Writer's Gym podcast.
Thank you for thanking us, Chris Gregory.
It's been character building. Thank you for listening to the Writer's Gym podcast with Rachel Knightley, Emily Inkpen, and me, Chris Gregory. If you'd like to learn more about Rachel and the Writer's Gym, please go to rachelknightley.com. To find out more about Emily, please go to emilyinkpen.com. And for Chris, go to alternativestories.com. We'll print all these links and more in the show notes for this podcast. The Writer's Gym podcast is an Alternative Stories 2024 production for the Writer's Gym. Production, sound design and editing were by me, Chris Gregory.